What if the loneliest moment of your life happens while you're still married? Claire never thought marriage would feel this quiet. When she married Ethan, she believed love would protect her from emptiness. She thought being chosen meant being seen forever. But 2 years after their wedding, in a small apartment in Seattle, she often felt like a guest in her own life. At first, the move to the city felt exciting. They explored coffee shops on rainy mornings. They took selfies near the waterfront. Ethan held her hand like he never wanted to let go. They talked about buying a house one day. Maybe starting a family. Everything felt possible, but slowly, without a clear moment of change, something shifted. Ethan's job at the tech company grew more demanding. Meetings stretched late. Weekends became catch-up days. His laptop was always open. His phone buzzed during dinner. Claire tried to be understanding. She told herself this was temporary. Success required sacrifice. She wanted to be supportive still. Support began to feel like silence. Most evenings, Claire ate alone. She would cook pasta, set 2 plates on the table, and wait. Sometimes Ethan texted that he was running late. Sometimes he didn't. When he finally walked in, he looked tired, distracted, already somewhere else in his mind. "How was your day?" she would ask. "Busy," he would reply. That word again. Busy. She missed the way he used to ask about her classes at the university. Claire worked part-time in the admissions office while finishing her master's degree. She once loved telling him small stories about students and professors. Now, when she spoke, his eyes drifted to his phone. One night, she wore the blue dress he once said made her look unforgettable. He didn't notice. Another night, she suggested they watch a movie together. He fell asleep halfway through. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't loud. That was the hardest part. There were no big fights. No harsh words. Just distance growing like a slow crack in glass. Claire began to question herself. Was she too sensitive? Too needy? Maybe this was normal. Maybe marriage simply settled into routine, but routine shouldn't feel like rejection. One rainy Thursday, she sat on the couch scrolling through old photos on her phone. Their wedding day. Ethan smiling at her like she was the only person in the room. She studied that version of him, wondering where he had gone. The door opened past 10 o'clock. Ethan stepped inside, shoulders tense. "You're still up?" he asked. "I wanted to see you," she said quietly. He nodded but didn't move closer. He headed straight to the kitchen. Claire followed him. Her heart pounded. She couldn't stay silent anymore. "Are we okay?" she asked. Ethan paused, confused. "Yeah. Why wouldn't we be?" "You feel far away," she admitted. He sighed, not angry, just tired. "Claire, I'm just under pressure at work." "It's nothing." Nothing. That word hurt more than she expected. She nodded, pretending to accept it. But inside, something fragile cracked. Over the next few weeks, she tried harder. She left small notes in his briefcase. She sent him encouraging texts. She planned a surprise dinner reservation at a restaurant they loved. He canceled at the last minute. "Big client presentation," he explained. "Rain check?" She smiled through the phone. "Of course." That night, she ate alone at the restaurant, telling the waiter her husband had been delayed. She stared at the empty chair across from her and felt foolish for hoping. The loneliness began to follow her everywhere. At work. On the bus. Even in bed beside him. They slept inches apart, but it felt like miles. Claire started staying longer on campus, not because she had to, but because going home felt heavy. Her coworkers noticed her quiet mood, but she brushed it off. Then one afternoon, while she was folding laundry, there was a knock at the door. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened it, Margaret stood there with a gentle smile and a container of homemade soup. "Surprise, Margaret," said warmly. "I was in the neighborhood." Claire felt sudden relief. Someone had shown up. For her, she invited her in. The apartment smelled clean but empty. Margaret glanced around slowly, taking in the quiet space. "You look tired, sweetheart," Margaret said. "I'm fine," Claire replied automatically. Margaret didn't argue. She moved into the kitchen like she belonged there, placing the soup on the stove. The simple act felt comforting. They sat at the table together. For the first time in weeks, Claire felt seen. Marriage can be complicated, Margaret said gently. Especially when work takes over. Claire's eyes lifted. Did Ethan tell you something? Margaret shook her head. No. But I remember those early years. Claire hesitated. She didn't want to complain. She didn't want to seem weak, but the words were already rising. I feel alone, she whispered. Saying it out loud made it real. Margaret reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You're not crazy for feeling that way. Tears filled Claire's eyes before she could stop them. I don't think he even sees me anymore. Margaret's expression changed slightly. Not shocked. Not judgmental. Just thoughtful. I've seen that look before, she said softly. I wore it once. Claire blinked. What do you mean? Margaret leaned back in her chair, as if deciding how much to reveal. There was a time, she began slowly, when I felt invisible in my own marriage too. Claire stared at her, surprised. Ethan always spoke of his parents as steady and strong. She had never imagined cracks in their story. Margaret's voice lowered. Loneliness can make you vulnerable in ways you don't expect. Claire's heart started beating faster. Be careful, Claire, Margaret added gently. When someone feels unseen, even a little attention from the wrong place can feel like rescue. The words settled heavily in the room. Claire suddenly thought of Daniel at work. His easy smile. The way he listened closely when she spoke. The way he once said, "You deserve more than silence." She pushed the thought away quickly. Margaret stood to leave shortly after. At the door, she paused. You deserve to feel loved, she said. But don't let loneliness choose your path for you. When the door closed, the apartment felt different. Not less lonely, but more fragile. That night, Ethan texted again, working late, a few seconds later, another message appeared on her phone from Daniel, are you okay? You seemed distant today, Claire stared at both messages. One from her husband. One from someone who was beginning to notice her too much. She felt the weight of a choice she hadn't meant to face, and for the first time, she realized loneliness wasn't just a feeling. It was the beginning of a decision that could change everything. What if the person warning you about a mistake once made it herself? The morning after Margaret's visit, Claire woke up with her thoughts racing. Ethan had left early again. The other side of the bed was cold. She stared at the ceiling and replayed Margaret's words. Loneliness can make you vulnerable. The sentence felt personal. Too personal. Her phone buzzed. A message from Margaret. Coffee today? There's something I want to tell you. Claire didn't hesitate. She needed clarity. She needed someone honest. They met at a small cafe downtown, the kind with wooden tables and soft music in the background. Rain tapped against the windows. The city felt distant, blurred by gray skies. Margaret was already there, sitting straight, hands wrapped around a cup of tea. She looked calm, but her eyes held something serious. Claire sat down. You said you wanted to tell me something. Margaret nodded slowly. I didn't sleep much last night. I kept thinking about you. Claire's chest tightened. I know that look, Margaret said. The one you had yesterday. I remember seeing it in the mirror years ago. Claire leaned forward, listening carefully. When Ethan was young, Margaret began, his father was building his career. Long hours. Constant travel. He said it was for us. And maybe it was. But I felt invisible. The words hit Claire hard. The story felt too familiar. I tried to be patient, Margaret continued. I told myself it was temporary. I stayed strong. But inside, I was breaking. Claire swallowed. She understood that kind of breaking. One day, someone at work started talking to me more than usual, Margaret said quietly. He noticed small things. Asked how I was really doing. It felt harmless at first. Claire felt her heartbeat rise. I didn't plan anything, Margaret added quickly. It wasn't about excitement. It was about feeling seen. The cafe seemed to grow quieter. I crossed an emotional line, Margaret admitted. I started looking forward to those conversations. I started dressing differently. Smiling more at someone who wasn't my husband. Claire stared at her, shocked but also grateful for the honesty. I told myself I deserved that attention, Margaret said. I told myself it wasn't wrong because nothing physical happened. But my heart was drifting. Claire thought of Daniel. The way he always remembered her coffee order. The way he noticed when she seemed tired. Margaret studied her face. Is there someone who's been kind to you lately? Claire hesitated. The truth felt dangerous. There's a colleague, she admitted softly. He's just attentive. Margaret nodded, not surprised. And how does that make you feel? Important, Claire whispered. Margaret's eyes softened. That's the trap. Claire felt exposed. Did Ethan's father ever find out? Margaret paused. Yes. The word hung heavy between them. I confessed, she said. Before it went further. I couldn't live with the guilt. Claire's stomach dropped. He was hurt, Margaret continued. Not angry in a loud way. Just deeply disappointed. And I realized something that changed me forever. Claire leaned closer. I wasn't actually in love with the other man, Margaret said. I was in love with the version of myself I felt when he paid attention to me. The sentence struck Claire like lightning. You don't fix loneliness by borrowing attention, Margaret added. You fix it by facing the truth in your own home. Claire looked down at her hands. She had been waiting for Ethan to notice her again. Waiting for him to change without fully explaining how deeply she was hurting. Did your marriage survive? Claire asked carefully. Margaret nodded. But it took honesty. Painful honesty. Counseling. Hard conversations. And boundaries. Claire felt both fear and hope. I share this with you because I see the same crossroads, Margaret said. You can step back now. Or you can convince yourself it's harmless until it's not. Claire's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced down. Daniel * lunch today? I'd like to hear more about your weekend. * Her heart skipped. Margaret noticed the shift in her expression. Is that him? Claire didn't answer directly. She locked her phone. I haven't done anything wrong, she said quickly. I know, Margaret replied gently. And I want it to stay that way. Silence filled the space between them. I don't want to lose Ethan, Claire admitted. But I also don't want to feel this empty. You shouldn't have to choose between loyalty and happiness, Margaret said. But you do have to choose courage. Courage, the word felt heavy. Talk to him, Margaret urged. Not softly. Not carefully. Honestly. Claire felt tears gather in her eyes. What if he doesn't change? Margaret reached across the table. Then at least you'll know you tried before looking elsewhere. The rain outside began to slow. Light broke through the clouds, faint but real. Claire took a deep breath. Were you ever tempted to keep going? To leave your marriage? Margaret's expression turned serious. For a moment, yes. Because it felt easier than fixing what was broken. Claire held on to that, but easy paths often lead to regret, Margaret added firmly. I almost destroyed my family chasing a feeling. Claire imagined Ethan's face. Tired. Distracted. But not cruel. Not unloving, just lost. As they stood to leave, Margaret placed a hand on Claire's shoulder. You deserve attention, she said. But make sure it comes from the right place. Outside, the air felt fresh after the rain. Claire checked her phone again. Another message from Daniel. * I hope I'm not overstepping. I just like talking to you. * Her heart pulled in two directions. At the same time, a notification appeared from Ethan. * Dinner tonight? I'll try to leave early. * Try. Claire stared at the two names on her screen. One offered steady history, even if it felt distant. The other offered new warmth, easy comfort. Margaret's confession echoed in her mind. * I wasn't in love with him. I was in love with how he made me feel. * Claire realized she was standing at the same edge, and the next choice she made would decide whether her loneliness became a lesson, or a mistake she could never take back. Consequence. ****. How far can someone go before they realize they are about to lose everything? Claire told herself it was just coffee, nothing more. She typed back a simple reply to Daniel. Asterisk lunch break. 40 minutes, asterisk the moment she sent it, her chest tightened. She wasn't planning to betray her marriage. She just wanted to feel normal again. Wanted to sit across from someone who looked at her like she mattered. The cafe near her office was busy, loud enough to hide private thoughts. Daniel was already seated when she arrived. He stood up when he saw her. That small gesture made her heart ache. "You look tired," he said gently. "So do you," she replied with a faint smile. They sat. The conversation flowed easily. Work stories. Jokes about office politics. Memories from college. Claire felt lighter than she had in months. She laughed without forcing it. Daniel watched her carefully. "I've been wanting to say something," he said. Her pulse quickened. "You deserve more than stress and silence," he continued. "You deserve someone who listens." The words sank deep. Claire stared at her coffee. "Marriage isn't always easy," she said, trying to sound steady. "I'm not judging," Daniel replied. "I just notice when someone feels alone." Alone, that word again. He reached across the table and lightly touched her hand. The contact was brief, almost innocent, but it carried weight. Claire didn't pull away at first. She felt warmth. Attention. Validation. Then Margaret's voice echoed in her mind. "You're standing at the edge." Claire slowly moved her hand back. "This is complicated," she said. Daniel nodded but didn't look away. "Feelings usually are." There it was. The unspoken truth. This was no longer casual. Her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced down. A message from Ethan. "I'll be late again." "Sorry." The familiar disappointment washed over her. Daniel noticed the change in her face. "He keeps choosing work," Daniel said quietly. Claire felt a sharp wave of emotion. Anger. Sadness. Temptation. For a moment, she imagined what life would be like if someone chose her first. Daniel leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You don't have to stay unhappy." That sentence hit harder than anything else. Claire's breathing grew shallow. She could feel the line in front of her. Invisible, but real. She stood up suddenly. "I can't do this," she said. Daniel looked surprised. "We're just talking." "No," she replied, shaking her head. "We're not just talking." The cafe noise faded into the background. Claire felt clear for the first time in weeks. "I made vows," she said softly. "And I haven't fought hard enough for them yet." Daniel's expression shifted from confidence to quiet disappointment. "I never wanted to cause trouble." "I know," she said. "But this is where it starts." She grabbed her bag and walked out before her courage could fade. The cool air outside hit her face. Her heart pounded as if she had run miles. She hadn't cheated. She hadn't crossed the final line. But she had come close enough to see the damage waiting on the other side. During the drive home, doubt crept in. What if she was overreacting? What if Ethan never changed? Was she choosing loneliness over happiness? By the time she reached the apartment, her thoughts were tangled. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The living room was dark except for a single lamp. Ethan was sitting on the couch. He wasn't on his phone. He wasn't working. He was just sitting there. Claire froze. "I didn't expect you home," she said carefully. "I left early," he replied. His voice sounded different. Heavy. Honest. She set her bag down slowly. "I talked to Mom," Ethan said. Claire's heart skipped. "About what?" "About us." Silence filled the room. "She said I've been repeating my father's mistakes," he continued. "She told me how close she came to losing everything." Claire swallowed hard. "I didn't know," Ethan admitted. "I thought providing was enough. I thought working harder meant loving you better." Tears filled her eyes. "But I haven't been here," he said. "Not really." Claire's defenses began to crack. "I feel alone," she whispered. Ethan nodded slowly. "I can see that now." He stood up and moved closer. Not too close. Just enough to close some of the distance that had grown between them. "Have I already lost you?" he asked quietly. The question shook her. She thought of the cafe. The touch of Daniel's hand. The way temptation had felt almost reasonable. "No," she answered truthfully. "But we were heading somewhere dangerous." Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. Is there someone else? The room felt smaller. She could lie. Protect him. Protect herself, but Margaret's words echoed again. You fix loneliness by facing the truth. There was a moment, Claire admitted carefully. I liked the attention. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, absorbing the pain. Did it go further? He asked. No, she said firmly. I walked away. Relief and hurt mixed on his face. I'm sorry, he said. For making you feel unseen. Claire felt tears fall freely now. I should have spoken louder about how much it was hurting. They stood there, facing the damage honestly for the first time. No yelling. No blame, just truth. Ethan took a slow breath. I don't want promotions if they cost me my marriage. Claire searched his face. This wasn't defensive. It wasn't rushed. It felt real. Then we have to change things, she said. He nodded. We will. But promises were easy in emotional moments. The real test would come later. As they sat together on the couch, closer than they had been in months, Claire felt both relief and fear. She had stepped back from the edge, but edges don't disappear overnight. Her phone buzzed again on the table. Daniel, I hope you got home safe, Claire stared at the screen. Ethan noticed the light from her phone but said nothing. The choice wasn't over yet. She picked up the phone slowly, knowing whatever she did next would either rebuild her marriage, or quietly begin tearing it apart. Can one honest decision save a love that was already slipping away? Claire stared at Daniel's message for a long moment. Ethan was sitting beside her, close but silent. The room felt still, like the air was waiting. I hope you got home safe. Such a simple sentence. So easy to answer. Claire felt the weight of everything behind it. The attention. The comfort. The dangerous warmth. She took a slow breath and typed back. Please don't message me anymore. I need to focus on my marriage. Her finger hovered for a second, then she pressed send. Her heart raced, but something inside her felt steady for the first time in weeks. She turned the phone face down on the table. Ethan looked at her, uncertain. Was that him? Yes, she said honestly. And I ended it. He didn't celebrate. He didn't question her. He simply nodded, understanding how close they had both come to losing something important. The next few days felt fragile. Not dramatic. Not perfect. Just careful. Ethan canceled a weekend work meeting. He suggested they walk by the waterfront like they used to. It felt awkward at first, like two people relearning each other. But awkward was better than distant. They talked more openly than ever before. Claire admitted how invisible she had felt. Ethan admitted how much pressure he had put on himself to succeed. He had grown up watching his father chase promotions, believing that providing was proof of love. I thought if I worked harder, everything else would stay stable, he said one evening as they sat on a park bench. I didn't see what I was losing. Claire listened without anger. She had seen his effort now. That mattered. A week later, she visited Margaret. They sat in Margaret's cozy kitchen, sunlight pouring through the windows. The room felt warm and safe. I told him everything, Claire said. Margaret studied her face. And? It hurt, Claire admitted. But it also cleared the air. Margaret nodded slowly. Truth usually does. Claire wrapped her hands around her mug. I ended things with Daniel. Margaret's shoulders relaxed. I'm proud of you. Claire shook her head gently. I almost made the same mistake you did. Yes, Margaret said softly. But you stopped sooner. There was no judgment in her voice. Only understanding. I kept thinking about what you said, Claire continued. About loving the way someone makes you feel. Margaret smiled sadly. We all want to feel valued. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Claire realized something important in that moment. Margaret had not shared her past to justify betrayal. She had shared it to prevent one. You saved my marriage, Claire said quietly. Margaret shook her head. No. You did. I just told you where the road might lead. That afternoon, Claire drove home feeling lighter. The real change didn't happen overnight. It came in small choices. Phones stayed off during dinner. Sunday mornings became their time, no work, no distractions. They even started couples counseling, not because they were broken beyond repair, but because they didn't want to drift again. In counseling, Claire spoke clearly about her needs. Ethan listened without defensiveness. He admitted he feared failure more than distance, and that fear had blinded him. "I don't want to win at work and lose at home," he said one session. Slowly, trust grew stronger. Daniel respected her boundary. He stopped messaging. At work, things stayed professional. Claire felt a brief sting of loss sometimes, not for him, but for the easy validation he had offered. But each time that feeling appeared, she reminded herself why she chose differently. Months passed. The apartment felt different now. Warmer. Fuller. Not because life became perfect, but because both of them showed up. One rainy evening, almost a year after Margaret first knocked on their door, Claire stood by the window watching the city lights blur in the storm. Ethan walked up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "I almost lost you," he said softly. She turned to face him. "We almost lost each other." He kissed her forehead gently. No rush. No distance. Later that week, the three of them had dinner together, Claire, Ethan, and Margaret. They laughed easily. Shared stories. The past no longer felt like a threat. It felt like a lesson. At one point, Ethan stepped out to take a quick call. Claire and Margaret were left alone at the table. Margaret looked at her carefully. "Are you happy?" Claire didn't answer quickly. She thought about the lonely nights. The coffee shop. The message. She almost responded to differently. "Yes," she said finally. "Because I chose to fight instead of escape." Margaret reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "That choice changes everything." Claire understood now. Infidelity doesn't begin with an action. It begins with silence. With unspoken hurt. With looking for comfort instead of demanding truth. She had stood at the edge, but she stepped back. That night, as she and Ethan walked to their car under the streetlights, Claire felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not just love, respect, for herself. For her marriage. For the woman who had warned her before it was too late. Margaret's past had nearly broken her own family once. But by sharing it honestly, she had protected another. And Claire knew something with deep certainty. Sometimes the person who once made a mistake becomes the reason someone else doesn't. As they drove home through the quiet city streets, Ethan reached for Claire's hand and held it firmly. She squeezed back, grateful, because one rainy afternoon, when loneliness almost chose her future, her mother-in-law knocked on the door and changed her life forever.